Everyone walked out, but the janitor solved it in 1 minute. What the CEO did after was shocking. The red emergency lighting cast an ominous glow through the conference room at Pinnacle Dynamics, where CEO Austin Reed stood staring at the whiteboard that had become his company's greatest challenge. At 28, Austin had built his software firm from a college dorm room idea into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. But the Calmer system crisis threatened to undo everything he'd worked for. 8 consulting firms had examined their flagship data processing platform over the past 4 months, each one more expensive than the last, and each one reaching the same devastating conclusion. The system's cascading failures were too complex to solve without rebuilding from scratch. A process that would take 18 months and cost more than Austin's company could survive. The architecture is sound in theory. The latest consultant had explained while packing up his equipment. But there's an underlying logic error that's creating recursive loops throughout the entire system. Without identifying the exact source, any fix we attempt just creates new problems downstream. Austin ran his hand through his blonde hair, feeling the weight of responsibility for the 47 employees whose livelihoods depended on the Calmer system remaining functional. 3 major clients had already threatened to terminate their contracts if the reliability issues weren't resolved within the week. The soft click of the conference room door interrupted his brooding. Austin turned, expecting to see his assistant with updates from their increasingly frantic technical team, but instead found himself looking at someone he'd barely noticed during her 6 months working the evening cleaning shift. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with distinctive pink, blonde hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her an unexpectedly intellectual appearance. She wore the standard white custodial uniform with yellow cleaning gloves, but something about the way she was studying the system diagram caught Austin's attention. Her blue eyes moved across the flowchart with a precision that seemed oddly analytical for someone whose job involved emptying wastebaskets. "I'm sorry," Austin said gently. "We just finished a meeting. You can go ahead with your cleaning." The young woman didn't reach for her supplies. Instead, she stepped closer to the whiteboard, her gaze fixed on a specific section of the diagram with an intensity that made Austin pause. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, her voice carrying an unexpected confidence. "My name is Sophia Michelle Park, and I believe I can identify your problem." Austin felt something shift in his expression. "You have experience with system architecture." Sophia's laugh held no humor, only a bitter recognition of irony. "You could say that." She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "I used to run a tech company myself, before I lost everything and ended up here." The words hung in the air, like a revelation that changed the entire dynamic of the room. Austin stared at this woman, who had just claimed expertise in the very field that was destroying his business. "You used to run a tech company." Austin's voice was barely above a whisper. Sophia nodded, her eyes never leaving the diagram. "Park Solutions. We specialized in complex data integration systems. Had about 60 employees before." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "Before I made a series of decisions that cost my investors $12 million and my employees their jobs." Austin felt his world tilting slightly. "Sophia Park. I remember reading about Park Solutions. You were featured in Tech Weekly as one of the industry's rising stars." "That was before the Henderson Project," Sophia replied, her voice growing stronger despite the obvious pain in her memories. "I was so confident in my approach that I ignored my team's concerns about system stability. When it failed, it took down not just our company, but our client's entire operation for 3 weeks. The lawsuits destroyed everything I'd built." She moved closer to the whiteboard, pointing to a specific junction in the flowchart. "But I learned something from that failure that 8 consultants apparently haven't figured out yet. Your problem isn't a logic error. It's a pride error." Austin followed her pointing finger, studying the area she'd indicated. "A pride error. The system is trying to optimize itself into failure," Sophia explained, her analytical mind clearly engaged despite the emotional weight of discussing her past. See here, where process of feeds back into the main filter. Whoever designed this was so focused on creating the most efficient possible pathway that they didn't account for what happens when efficiency becomes the enemy of stability. As Sophia spoke, Austin began to see what 8 expensive consulting firms had missed. The system's failures weren't random or chaotic. They were the predictable result of a design philosophy that prioritized elegance over resilience. It's the same mistake I made at Park Solutions, Sophia continued, her yellow, gloved finger tracing the problematic pathways. I was so determined to build the perfect system that I forgot the most important rule in engineering. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect, because perfect systems have no room for the imperfect reality of actual use. Austin stared at this woman who had identified in minutes what had eluded months of professional analysis. How do we fix it? Sophia smiled for the first time since entering the room, and Austin caught a glimpse of the confident executive she had once been. You add intentional inefficiency. Right here and here. She marked 2 points on the diagram. Create buffer zones that slow the system down just enough to prevent it from optimizing itself into chaos. It'll run at about 92% of theoretical maximum, but it'll run reliably for years. That's it. Austin asked, amazed at the elegance of the solution. That's it. Sophia confirmed. 30 seconds to implement the code changes, maybe another 30 to restart the system. The hardest part is accepting that the most beautiful solution isn't always the best solution. Austin looked at this woman who had walked away from everything and was now cleaning offices while carrying the knowledge to save his company. Sophia, why didn't you tell me you had this expertise when you were hired? Sophia's smile became rueful. Because I'm the woman who lost $12 million and destroyed 60 careers because I thought I was smarter than everyone else. Would you have listened to me? Or would you have seen me as the cautionary tale I've become? The honesty in her answer hit Austin like a physical blow. You took this job to stay close to the industry. I took this job because it was the only work I could find after my professional reputation was destroyed. Sophia replied with quiet dignity. But yes, I stayed because being around the work I love, even as a cleaner, felt better than running away from it entirely. Austin reached for his phone, then stopped. Sophia Michelle Park, before I call my technical team, I need to ask you something. What do you want now? What would make this right? Sophia looked at her yellow cleaning gloves, then back at Austin. I want to help fix your system because it's the right thing to do. Not because I expect anything in return, but because I've learned that the only way to rebuild trust is to use whatever knowledge you have in service of others without expecting reward. And after we fix the system, I'll finish cleaning your conference room and continue doing the work I was hired to do. Sophia said simply. Redemption isn't about returning to where you were. It's about becoming someone worthy of where you are. But what happened next was what truly shocked everyone at Pinnacle Dynamics. After the Kalmar system was restored to full functionality, using Sophia's elegant solution, Austin made an announcement that rippled through the entire tech community. He was creating a new position, Chief Resilience Officer, responsible for ensuring that all company systems included safeguards against the kind of perfectionist thinking that led to failure. And he was offering the position to Sophia, not despite her past failure, but because of what she had learned from it. Sophia Park taught me something that no business school ever could. Austin told his assembled staff that the most valuable experience often comes from the hardest lessons, and that sometimes the person who has failed dramatically is exactly the person you need to help you avoid failing at all. Sophia accepted the position, but kept her yellow cleaning gloves in her desk drawer as a reminder that every job, no matter how humble it might appear, was an opportunity to serve others and rebuild trust one honest action at a time. 6 months later, when business journals wrote about Pinnacle Dynamics' remarkable turnaround and innovative approach to system resilience, They focused on breakthrough management techniques and cutting-edge engineering philosophy. But Austin always smiled when he read those articles, knowing that the real story was much simpler and much more human. Sometimes the most valuable knowledge comes not from success, but from failure honestly faced and wisdom humbly earned. And sometimes the best person to prevent disaster is someone who has lived through one and learned that true strength comes not from never falling down, but from getting back up and using what you've learned to help others avoid the same mistakes. In a world that often confuses confidence with competence, Sophia Michelle Park had reminded everyone at Pinnacle Dynamics that the most profound expertise sometimes comes wrapped in yellow cleaning gloves and carried by someone brave enough to try again.